Hey guys, tonight we slip off our shoes and step quietly into a world where the air smells faintly of sandalwood. The shadows are shaped by mango leaves, and somewhere, in the distance, a peacock might be pretending not to pose. You're not rushing. You're not even walking, more like floating. The Mughal garden doesn't care about your deadlines, your unread messages, or the email marked urgent. Here, the only thing urgent is whether you nap in the sun-dappled pavilion or under that sprawling pomegranate tree that's practically begging for a hammock. This isn't a story of battles or broken treaties. You probably won't survive this because, honestly, you'll be fast asleep before we even get past the first lotus pond. No judgment, the mules designed it that way. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you feel like it, drop your location and local time in the comments. I always love seeing where you're listening from. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You start at a carved stone gate that swings open with a sigh, as if even it knows this is not a place for haste. Behind it, a hush. A wall of silence that feels intentional, not empty. The Mughal garden doesn't announce itself, it reveals. Brick by brick, scent by scent, step by meandering step. You place a foot onto a path of cool sandstone. The garden exhales. Gravel crunches softly under your heel, a lullaby in mineral form. On either side, waist-high walls of trimmed mehndi and hibiscus suggest direction, but don't demand it. You can turn left, or not. The garden will still be here. It's not going anywhere. It's been waiting for you since the 16th century. The mules, those architect emperors of India's grandest centuries, weren't just builders of forts and domes. They built sanctuaries for the senses. Think of Babur, founder of the dynasty, with a conqueror's sword in one hand and a gardening trowel in the other. Seriously, the man wrote more about flowers than about most of his battles. His memoirs get all misty-eyed about the symmetry of a poppy bed. You can almost imagine him peering over your shoulder as you admire a stand of marigolds. "Not enough orange," he mutters. You walk further. Water murmurs nearby, the way a sleepy cat might purr. It's not one stream, but four flowing from a central pool outward like veins from a beating heart. This is the Chahor Bagh layout. Four-part garden, inspired by ancient Persian ideals of paradise. Four rivers like those in the Quranic vision of Eden. One of water, one of milk, one of wine, one of honey. You're tempted to test the streams, but no, this is metaphorical hydration. Sorry. In the center, a raised platform, maybe marble, maybe red sandstone, invites you to sit. You don't. You recline. Because that's what these gardens are for. Even emperors lay here after lunch, hands on their chests, eyelids fluttering like jasmine petals. Somewhere, a gardener glides past, broom in hand. He's been sweeping since dawn. Not because it's messy, he just likes the lines it leaves in the dust. Call it Mughal ASMR. You hear a soft thump as ripe guavas fall near a sleeping squirrel. This garden doesn't mind company, but it also knows how to gently silence it. And oh, the light. Not sharp, not blazing. It filters through the leaves like whispered gossip, dappling the ground with shifting patterns. No two sunspots are the same. Even your shadow seems to stretch itself out more lazily here, like it's already settling in for a siesta. One of the quirkiest details of these Mughal retreats, the sound architecture. Yep, acoustics. Historians still argue whether the fountains were designed to cool the air or lull the mind. Some say the specific pitch of falling water was chosen to mimic the human voice at rest, or the tones of evening prayer. Whether that's fact or fever dream doesn't really matter. The result is the same. Your shoulders drop a little. Your breathing slows. The world beyond the garden gates your calendar. Your to-do list starts dissolving. You pass a shallow channel carved with geometric precision. It loops through the garden like a silver ribbon, crossing under stone bridges and pouring over low ledges with the gentlest splash. You know those indoor water features that try a little too hard in dentist offices. This is their ancient, effortlessly elegant ancestor. You lean close. It smells faintly of rosewater and something greener, sharper, maybe vetiver. The grass roots they use to line channels so they smell better in summer. Not everything is so idyllic though. See that archway off to the left? Once it led to private chambers where Mughal nobles conspired, loved, or occasionally plotted betrayals so subtle they'd make a Netflix drama look clumsy. But here's the twist. Many of these plans were hatched during walks in gardens exactly like this. Apparently, treason pairs well with jasmine tea and peacock calls. Speaking of peacocks, one steps delicately into view, tail folded, head tilted. It stares at you like it owns the place, which, in many ways, it does. These birds were prized pets in the Mughal courts. Shah Jahan supposedly had a peacock trained to follow him like a dog. That might be apocryphal. But if true, it's both adorable and vaguely unsettling. You settle on a low bench made of carved stone, its surface worn smooth by centuries of sitters, nappers, and lovers pretending not to be lovers. A breeze lifts the edge of your sleeve. The temperature here always seems to hover just below perfect, like the garden negotiates with the weather on your behalf. Even the insects respect the mood. A butterfly lands on your knee. You don't flinch. You barely notice. That's how the garden gets you. Slowly, gently, like a lullaby written in vines and light. And yet, under all this calm, a deeper current hums. Power. These gardens weren't just pretty backdrops. They were stage sets for empire. When emperors received foreign dignitaries here, the message was clear. We conquered chaos. We command beauty. You see these pools? They reflect our control. You see that flowering shrub? It's imported from Persia, planted by hands that built fortresses last week. These gardens whispered politics in the language of petals. Still, none of that feels urgent now. The sun has moved slightly. You feel it on your toes. Nap suggests itself like a polite dinner guest who won't leave. You almost give in, but no, there's more to see. As you rise, the fragrance shifts again. More orange blossom now, less rose. That's part of the choreography. The Mughal garden changes its perfume as you move, thanks to strategic plantings. Florists today try to recreate it with scented candles, but it's never quite the same when it comes from wax instead of petals. You stretch arms above your head. No one stares, no one cares. In a place like this, even stretching feels like a ceremony. The garden approves. A leaf tumbles lazily from a neem tree and lands right where your head had been. Nature's version of saving your spot. As you walk, you realize there are no straight lines here, even when there are. The symmetry is deceptive balanced, yes, but softened by vines, blurred by moss. It's perfection with a slight slouch, like a tailored jacket worn over pajamas. Elegant, but still sleep-ready. And now, another gate comes into view, smaller than the first, quieter. A suggestion rather than a statement. Beyond it lies another chamber of the garden. You can't tell what's in there yet, only that it smells slightly sweeter. Maybe more lilac, maybe something warmer. You move toward it like a dreamer toward a half-remembered memory. The garden doesn't speak, but it hums. The air vibrates with centuries of restfulness. And you, lucky wanderer, are exactly where you need to be. You duck slightly to pass through the smaller garden gate. It's arched low and edged with climbing roses. The petals brush your shoulders like they're checking in. You still with us? You are. Though your eyes feel a little heavier, a good sign. You step through, and suddenly everything feels more deliberate, less wild. The hedges are tighter, the flower beds more symmetrical. Even the breeze seems choreographed. This is where geometry takes the stage. In the heart of the Mughal garden, mathematics becomes lullaby. Every footstep you take is part of a centuries-old plan. The square you're walking across, it's not just a square, it's a cosmic diagram. Every angle, every watercourse, every tree placement follows an invisible blueprint designed to soothe not just the eye, but the soul. The Chahar Bagh design, the four-part garden, is more than aesthetics. It's philosophy laid out in turf and stone. You find yourself walking down a central path lined with cypress trees, their dark, narrow bodies rising like punctuation marks. Straight lines lead the eye forward, always to a center, usually a fountain, sometimes a pavilion, once in a while a throne. The symmetry is unyielding, but never harsh. It's the kind of symmetry that whispers, not shouts. Historians still argue whether these geometries were meant purely for spiritual symbolism, or also to subtly demonstrate the emperor's ability to organize nature itself. Probably both. When you have access to elephants, engineers, and unlimited labor, there's no harm in flexing your spiritual and logistical muscles simultaneously. The path underfoot shifts to inlaid stone. You pause and look down. Tiny tiles, some no bigger than your thumbprint, arranged in hypnotic patterns. Stars within stars, circles within squares. You could lie down right here and stare at the path forever. In fact, you do just for a second. It's shockingly cool against your back. You stretch out. Overhead, the branches form a loose grid against the sky, the leaves quivering slightly, as if they too are following some celestial blueprint. A lizard scurries across the tiles. It stops, blinks at you, and vanishes into a crack in the geometry. The system allows for surprise. That's the Mughal genius. Structure with just enough chaos to keep you from noticing how structured it really is. You sit back up, slowly. The sun has moved again. It always does. Mughal architects accounted for that too. They designed these gardens not just for one moment, but for every hour of the day. Where shadows would fall at noon, where the breeze would drift at dusk, where the scent of tuberose would be strongest right after sunrise. You're walking through a 24-hour experience, perfectly tuned to the planet's own quiet pirouette. You reach a fountain at the center of four intersecting paths. Its splash is softer than before, more restrained, as if this part of the garden has better manners. A lotus floats in the shallow basin, pink against the pale marble. You stare at it. It stares back, or seems to. Some claim the mules believed these central pools connected the earthly and the divine. Others say they were just good places to wash your hands and cool your feet. Either way, your fingers trail the surface. It's cold enough to jolt, but not enough to wake. You glance around and notice something strange. No random trees. Everything is in pairs, rows, or deliberate clusters. Cypress trees alternate with fruit, trees symbolizing death and life. You frown slightly, then smile. Even in paradise, the mules couldn't help but include a reminder. Nothing lasts forever, but maybe it doesn't need to. A gardener appears, dressed in loose cotton, pulling a cart of saplings. He hums tunelessly, the kind of half-melody people fall into when they've worked in one place so long they've begun to sync with it. You nod at him. He doesn't see you. Or maybe he does, but he knows you're already halfway to sleep. A gentle path curves off from the main axis. You take it. No signs, no warnings. Just a quiet suggestion of movement. As you walk, the symmetry softens. Trees become less disciplined. Vines start getting ideas. The path meanders now. You pass a carved screen, its yali lattice casting patterned shadows on the ground. One of the patterns looks like a star, another like a petal, another like an open eye, just beginning to close. This deviation from symmetry isn't a flaw, it's the planned contrast. The mules knew that too much perfection was exhausting. That's the genius. Give you geometry, then give you breathing room. You're being guided without realizing it. like a nap that begins as reading and ends with a book on your chest and your dreams somewhere in the margins. Along the wall to your right, there's a narrow aqueduct. Water runs quietly through it, almost bashful. A few dragonflies hover above, their wings catching the light. You follow the water as it dips, turns, and disappears beneath a walkway. Nearby, you spot a worn stone with strange engravings. Scholars still debate whether these carved symbols were part of a calendrical system or merely decorative flair. One theory suggests they tracked seasonal planting cycles using geometric star maps embedded into the garden stones. Another argues they were just elaborate doodles by bored artisans with a flair for the dramatic. Either way, you like them. They look important, but not in a loud way. Like a secret only the stone and the sunlight know. You round a corner and find a raised platform with 4 steps leading to a square pavilion. Its roof is held up by slender columns and draped in hanging vines. You sit on the top step. No cushions, no ceremony, just the solid embrace of warm stone and filtered sunlight. This would have been a favorite spot for court poets, maybe? Or the emperor's astronomer. Or someone's daydreaming daughter who'd rather chart bee migrations than memorize palace etiquette. You lie down again, just for a moment. The garden doesn't mind. In fact, it insists. Your thoughts slow to a crawl. The math of the garden continues around you, gently pulsing. The balance of line and curve, of shade and sun, of rest and motion. The geometry isn't cold, it's generous. A kind of architecture that asks nothing but gives everything. Your eyes flicker closed for a moment. You imagine waking here hundreds of years ago, in silk robes instead of a t-shirt, with mango juice on your fingers instead of phone screen smudges. But really, it's not so different. The smell of jasmine, the trickle of water, the distant call of a coal bird. Some things stay. You rise again. Slowly, the pavilion offers a view you hadn't noticed before. Long rectangular channel lined with blue tiles. It stretches away from you like a river of sleep. Beyond it, another gateway. You know by now, every passage leads to another layer, another scene. But the core stays the same. Symmetry, serenity, a garden where you never need to rush. You step off the platform. A petal lands on your shoulder. You don't brush it off. You leave it there like a temporary badge of belonging. Ahead, a mulberry tree sways, half inviting, half ignoring you. You follow its shade. As you go, you realize the garden has changed you. Not with force, just through quiet insistence. You breathe differently. Slower, your footsteps land softer. Your thoughts speak more in images than in words now. The path you're on bends slightly, just enough to hide what comes next. You follow anyway. You follow the bend without hesitation now, like someone who's given up needing to know what's around every corner. The path curls into a pocket of stillness where the air feels cooler, heavier, like the garden just took a long exhale. Trees press closer here, forming a canopy that filters the sunlight into lazy golden strands. A nearby fountain gurgles so softly it sounds like a whisper being rehearsed. And then you see him. Well, not CC, more like sense. There, reclining in the dappled shade beside a fountain shaped like a starburst, lies a sleeping emperor. His robes spill across the cushions like spilled cream, his turban slightly askew. One sandal lies a few inches from his foot, forgotten in the act of drifting off. He's not posing, he's not performing, he's napping. You pause, partly out of respect, partly because you're not entirely sure he's not a dream conjured by the garden. Shah Jahan. Maybe Jahangir, could be. Or just one of the many nobles who treated these gardens less like imperial showcases and more like private, sacred nap zones. Welcome to the other purpose of Mughal gardens, the art of the imperial siesta. See, these weren't just places to show off power. They were designed for pleasure, peace, and post-lunch drowsiness. You glance at a shaded marble slab nearby, and lower yourself onto it. The stone is warm from the sun, but cool underneath. It feels like the garden is pulling the stress from your spine, one vertebra at a time. Around you, the sound of fountains isn't even trying to impress anymore. It just trickles on, calmly, like someone telling a story you've already heard but don't mind hearing again. These weren't just decorations, they were deliberate tools for relaxation. Engineers angled the channels so the water would hit certain surfaces at specific speeds, creating acoustics that lulled the senses. It's practically weaponized serenity. And those cushions, oh, there were cushions. Layers upon layers of silk, brocade, and velvet, arranged beneath pavilions that let in the breeze but filtered out the sun. Paintings from the period show emperors sprawled with one leg tucked, holding a goblet lazily as courtiers stood around, pretending not to notice the snoring. Historians still argue whether these midday reclines were political performance or genuine downtime. Some say the emperor had to be seen as human, someone who enjoyed mangoes and naps, just like everyone else. Others claim it was about ritual rest as a marker of rhythm and cosmic harmony. You just know it looks very comfortable. A breeze moves through the branches above, and the leaves respond with a slow-motion rustle. A bird lands nearby and begins preening with such methodical care that you consider taking notes. There's a kind of gentle choreography here. The leaves sway, the water glints, and even the air seems to move in time with some ancient lullaby. You spot a low table nearby, intricately inlaid with mother-of-pearl and delicate floral patterns. On it, a silver tray holds what looks like slices of melon, cubes of sugar, and a bowl of rose-scented water for dipping your fingers. It might not be real. You're not entirely sure anymore, but it feels real. That's the trick of the Mughal gardenate, blurs the line between architecture and dream. And yes, those emperors truly embraced leisure. Babur, the founder of the dynasty, was obsessed with gardens because he missed the ones from his childhood. In Central Asia, he wrote about them like lost loves always, describing the smell of the grass, the sound of water, the balance of elevation. Imagine conquering a subcontinent and still thinking, you know what, I really miss that apricot orchard from when I was 10. You recline back further. Insects buzz lazily nearby, not in a threatening way, more like the garden is humming to itself. A court musician somewhere plucks a slow, trembling note from a sitar. Not a performance, just an echo. A leftover vibration from some celebration long past. One of the more curious details. Mughal gardens were also hospitals. Not officially, but in practice. People believed the smell of flowers, the movement of air, and the sound of water could cure melancholy and indigestion, and whatever else ailed the soul. Some nobles spent weeks here when recovering from illness. You wonder if that's still allowed. You also wonder if burnout counts as a diagnosis, 'cause if it does, you'd like to book a month. Thanks. Somewhere in the corner, under a flowering gulmohar tree, a servant fans the emperor with a palm frond. You swear you see his eyelids twitch, not in stress, but in the middle of a dream he's already forgotten. This wasn't a culture that feared sleep. It embraced it, honored it. Afternoon rest wasn't laziness. It was alignment with nature, with rhythm, with the movement of time itself. You close your eyes for a moment. The scent of jasmine wafts past. Then a stronger smell of sandalwood, mixed with a trace of dust and something sweet like cardamom. Your breathing syncs with the trickle of the water. You don't mean to fall asleep. You just mean to rest your eyes. You wake maybe 1 minute later, maybe 10, and the emperor is gone. So is the table. Just birds now. The same stone beneath you, now slightly cooler. You rise and walk again. As you do, you pass a small marble plaque engraved in Persian. You can't read it, but your brain decides it's probably a poem. Something about shade and silence and how all things, even empires, eventually soften into memory. You pass another nook of the gardeny small domed structure with fluted arches and tiny mirrors embedded in the ceiling. A sheesh mahal, or mirror palace. Even in the daytime, it twinkles faintly. At night, with lamps lit, it must have looked like the stars fell in for a sleepover. You step inside. The air is cool. Your reflection follows you in 1,000 fragments, blinking, shimmering, soft. This was probably where someone once wrote verses or listened to them, or just leaned back against a pillow and watched candlelight move like liquid across the ceiling. Historians debate whether these mirror chambers were spiritual spaces or just really fancy lounges. Maybe both. Maybe the point is that there was no line between beauty and function, between reflection and rest. As you leave the chamber, the garden opens up again. A long colonnade stretches ahead, flanked by low pools filled with lilies. Birds strut across the path as if inspecting their kingdom, and maybe they are. After all, the emperors are long gone, but the garden remains. You think of the emperor, snoring gently in the shade. You wonder how many dreams were dreamt here, how many schemes were paused halfway because someone fell asleep mid-thought. Maybe history itself was delayed a few hours just so someone could finish their nap. You chuckle softly at the thought. And then you walk on. You follow the colonnade until the path veers slightly just enough to signal that something is about to shift. The light changes, too, as if the garden is drawing back a curtain. The shade thins, the ground warms beneath your steps and ahead. Through a stone arch etched with delicate floral vines, you find a garden within the garden. This one feels different. Here, the trees stand taller, older. The flower beds burst with a kind of careful abundance. The space seems heavier somehow, like it's holding secrets. You feel it in your chest, a low hum of memory. You've walked into a garden grown from victory. Because these gardens, they were never just about beauty. They were born of conquest. You're walking through a monument not to war, but to what came after. When the swords were sheathed and the horses stabled, and the spoils of battle riches, artisans, exotic seeds were quietly turned into tulips and terraces. Babur again, always Babur. The guy couldn't help himself. He took cities like Samarkand and Kabul, not just for their strategic value, but for their gardens. He once lamented that India was too flat, too dusty. So what did he do? He brought the mountains with him in spirit, at least. He recreated them through terraces and tiers, channels and slopes. His gardens were memories of home, softened by nostalgia and spiced with the thrill of new conquest. You stop at a raised platform at Baradari. They called it 12-pillared and open to the breeze. It overlooks a rectangular garden carved with surgical precision. From up here, you can see the bones of it. Symmetry, yes, but also hierarchy. The main path is broad, meant for emperors. The side paths, for nobles. The alleys, for everyone else. Even in a garden, the Mughal sense of order persisted. Historians still argue whether this spatial choreography was about spiritual symbolism or political messaging. Probably both again. You're starting to see a pattern. Below, a narrow stream cuts through the center. Its banks are lined with flowering shrubs, roses, marigolds, and something you can't quite name but smells faintly of citrus and cinnamon. A servant, likely invisible a century ago, used to release floating petals here when royal guests arrived. Not a big ceremony, just a quiet hello in the language of water and bloom. You descend the platform stairs and continue walking. Around you, the landscape tells stories. This Gulmohar tree, a descendant of one planted after a victorious campaign in the Deccan. That marble bench, carved from stone brought back by a general who insisted it came from a hill that looked like a sleeping lion. Maybe he was right, or maybe he was just tired. You pass a grove of orange trees arranged in perfect squares. Not for efficiency, but symbolism. Oranges weren't just snacks, they were trophies. Proof that Mughal control reached from snowy Kabul to the tropics of the subcontinent. The fruit smelled like empire. You reach up and gently touch a leaf. It trembles under your fingers, but doesn't fall. And the workers who built all this, thousands, artisans from across Asia, gardeners who spoke Persian, Urdu, Kashmiri, builders from Samarkand, architects trained under Timurid geometry and Indian monsoon logic. The result? A style that looked like no single place and every place all at once. You spot a carved basin set into the ground. Empty now, but once it was a bath private, shallow. Meant for a noblewoman who liked to soak in rosewater and watch pigeons circle overhead. Not a bad life. Though honestly, you'd settle for a splash and a nap. Nearby, a peacock lets out a honking screech. You jump slightly. The bird looks at you with zero remorse. If anything, he seems proud. This is his garden now, after all. There's a moment of pause as you pass beneath another arched trellis, this one tangled with climbing jasmine. The air thickens, just slightly. Not hot, just rich. A scent so floral, it makes your knees feel soft. You lean against a low wall and take it in. You imagine the garden centuries ago. A prince returning from a campaign, stepping off his horse, armor still dusted with battle. He walks into the garden not to celebrate, but to decompress. A personal exhale in a space carved from war, but curated for peace. That's the quiet contradiction here. These gardens, so full of life, were built with the spoils of violence. The blood soaked into distant soils fertilized these lilies. And yet, none of that lingers in the air. Only the fragrance of flowers. Only the silence between breezes. Maybe that's the garden's magic, its ability to make even conquest feel like a story someone else told. You come across a niche in the garden wall. A hollow space scalloped at the top. These mihrabs weren't always for prayer sometimes, they were purely decorative. A place to set a lantern or a vase, or a verse. A tiny inscription is carved there, nearly worn away. You squint. A line of Persian poetry. I have not conquered lands, but moments. You exhale. Yeah, that sounds about right. Your path takes you past another pavilion, laurifed, with intricate inlay work and faded frescoes of vines and birds. It's half collapsed now, one side leaning slightly like an aging relative refusing to sit down. You duck inside. The air here is cooler, darker. A resting place, not for grandeur, but for shade. And someone once tried to restore this pavilion. You see patches where newer plaster covers the cracks, like band-aids on marble skin. Mughal gardens are always being repaired, reinvented, sometimes misunderstood. The British came and saw only aesthetic. They replanted, restructured, redefined, changed the walkways, added gazebos. They kept the form, maybe, but drained the intention. The garden went on, because gardens don't hold grudges. It's good, they just keep blooming. You emerge again into sunlight. A fig tree leans over a low pond. Carp flicker beneath the surface, orange flashes in the green water. One swims lazily to the edge, opens its mouth, then forgets what it was doing. Mood, the path opens into a large courtyard, once used for ceremonies. Now it's just space open, warm, waiting. You stand there for a moment, alone with the rustle of wind and water. Somewhere in the distance, a pair of doves murmur to each other in the branches. You wonder what it would be like to live here, not as an emperor, but as someone who sweeps the petals, or folds the cushions, or simply naps here every afternoon, watched over by vines and forgotten gods. You sit, not because you're tired, it's because it feels like the right thing to do. The stone beneath you hums faintly with the memory of footsteps, of victories turned into vineyards, of ambition turned into avocado trees. You lean back. The sky above you is pale and wide, the kind of sky that makes history feel smaller and sleep feel closer. The garden doesn't judge where you come from, only that you stay long enough to slow down. Maybe, for a moment, forget everything but the scent of orange blossoms. You sit there for who knows how long, maybe 5 minutes, maybe 5 centuries. The garden doesn't keep time in the usual way. It measures in shadows and scent, in how long it takes a bee to circle a hibiscus flower, in how slowly your breathing starts to match the rhythm of the breeze. Eventually, you stand and follow a new path, this one narrower, paved in rougher stone, as if signaling a shift, not just in location, but in lineage. You're heading toward something older, deeper, and as you step into the next section, you feel it. The garden changes. Less imperial now, more intimate. The grandeur fades into something softer. The lines curve a bit more. The walls sit lower. Flower beds spill over their borders. It feels wilder. Tease, adaptation. This is the Persian garden in Indian soil. The blueprint has bloomed. You're walking the line between inheritance and invention. The original Mughal garden, ideal imported by Babur and cultivated in Kabul, was all about order, water, geometry. But India doesn't follow rules without first having a good long chat about them. The climate is wetter. The sun is stronger. The flowers bolder. What worked in Herat or Samarkand had to bend, twist, evolve under the Indian monsoon. And evolve it did. You pass a bed of marigolds so bright they could probably power a small village. They weren't part of the Persian palette. But here, they're practically the local welcome committee. Behind them, banana leaves unfurl like green fans, wide and dramatic. You swear one of them waves at you. The Mughal garden in India became a marriage, part imported vision, part homegrown exuberance. Geometry remained, but now it flirted with abundance. Persian austerity softened under Indian humidity. A square became a sanctuary. A watercourse curved slightly to follow the land. Practicality and poetry started holding hands. You duck under a trellis blooming with bougainvillea. The petals rain down like confetti at a party that's been going since the 1500s. Beneath your feet, you notice the paving stones shift in pattern. They're laid in chevron noun, Indian flourish added over time. Some even have little handprints baked into them from centuries ago when artisans set them in place. It's not history in books, it's history underfoot. Historians still argue whether these changes were deliberate stylistic shifts or simply the result of adapting to new conditions. Did the mules intend to fuse styles? Or did India slowly reshape their designs like rain reshaping a stone? Maybe both, maybe neither. The truth is probably lost in the jasmine-scented breeze. You reach a small alcove framed by trees and flowering shrubs. Inside is a well-deep, square structure lined with stone, half filled with moss and memory. A bucket hangs nearby. You lower it slowly and listen. The sound echoes forever before you hear the plunk. That's how deep these roots go. The Persians might have brought the layout, but the Indians brought the flourish. The Mughal garden became a conversation. Rose meets campa. Tulip meets turmeric. The result? An aesthetic that whispers in 3 languages and dreams in 5. You pause to admire a carved relief set into the wall. It's a flower. Yes, but not any flower you recognize. 5 petals spiraling inwards. Stylized, abstract. It's not botanical, symbolic. A blend of Persian motif and Indian imagination. You lean in closer. Someone scratched a tiny note beneath it in Devanagari script. A love poem, probably, or a lunch order, hard to tell. Somewhere nearby, a gardener gently waters a patch of delicate herbs. He moves with the precision of ritual. You recognize Tulsi, and maybe ajwain. These weren't in Babur's original garden plans, but they found their place here. Because even the imperial garden had room for kitchen corners and medicine patches. You find a bench beneath a banana tree and sit. The bench is made of dark stone and inlaid with semi-precious gemslapis, carnelian, jade. Not flashy. Just a subtle reminder that the mules could find a way to make anything regal, even sitting down. You close your eyes for a moment, and in that quiet, you imagine the conversations that shaped these gardens. Babur, sketching layouts in his journal. Humayun trading ideas with Persian architects while nibbling on dried apricots. Akbar, consulting astrologers on tree placement. Jahangir, obsessed with exotic flowers, sending men to the far corners of the empire in search of rare seeds. Shah Jahan, commissioning fountains to murmur at exactly the right frequency for philosophical daydreaming. Each emperor brought something different. Babur brought memory. Akbar brought ambition. Jahangir brought refinement. Shah Jahan brought obsession. The garden received them all and responded accordingly. You rise again and find a gently sloping ramp leading to a lower terrace. A stream tumbles down the center, man-made of course, but made to look like it just happened to be there. The sound is lovely. Gentle. Just enough movement to soothe, not stir. At the base, you find a shaded pool surrounded by flowering trees. It's not large, not grand, but it feels perfect. You sit at the edge, slip off your shoes, and dip your toes into the water. Cold, sharp, alive, the pool is lined with tiles, some chipped, some cracked, all beautiful. Blues and greens that shimmer like a fish's back. This kind of tile work, called kashi, came from Persia, but in India, the colors got bolder, the lines less rigid. Some pieces even seem to laugh a little, like they know they're slightly crooked and don't care. You lean back on your elbows and watch the leaves overhead. They move slowly, almost theatrically. You wonder what the garden would say if it could speak. Maybe something like this. You don't need to be original, you just need to listen. Borrow a bit of structure, plant your own seeds, and let time do the rest. A butterfly lands on your knee. You don't move. Why would you? Far off, a flute begins to play. Not a concert, just someone passing the time. The notes rise and fall like a breeze, barely touching you. You don't need to know the tune. The feeling is enough. As you dry your feet and continue on, you realize you're not just walking through history. You're walking through a conversation, one that started in Persia, wandered through Kabul, took root in Delhi, and is still unfolding, petal by petal, under your feet. You smile. And you keep walking. The path meanders now, not in rebellion, but in quiet confidence. You've crossed from rigid, courtly design into something that breathes deeper, more slowly. This part of the garden doesn't announce itself. It just unfolds. Like a nap you didn't mean to take, but which pulls you under anyway. There's a softness here. You feel it in the air. In the way the grass grows higher around the paths, as though allowed to be a little unruly. In the way the light spills through a trellis without trying to show off. This isn't about empire anymore. It's about escape. You've entered the private zone, the hidden garden within the garden. A sanctuary carved into the imperial blueprint for those moments when even emperors needed to disappear. Not from danger, from attention. This was where they went to stop performing. You pass under a narrow stone arch, half covered in moss. Beyond it, the garden is cloistered, quiet, secluded. Trees grow thicker, shrubs nestle into corners like secrets. The walls are higher, here not defensive, just intimate. Designed not to keep people out, but to keep the noise of court life from bleeding in. This is where the women of the Zanana, the royal harem, would walk, or rest, or sit and watch the shadows drift across the pool's surface. This wasn't a prison, despite what the word harem tends to conjure. It was more like a world within a world, quieter, shaded world. You find a small octagonal pool at the center, with a domed pavilion beside its Chatri style, with scalloped arches and carved floral brackets. It's easy to imagine royal daughters or scholars reclined there, books open, feet bare, losing hours to poetry and gossip and the sound of distant fountains. This was their space, their retreat from the marble corridors of state. A few jasmine petals float on the pool surface and you watch them drift without direction, like your thoughts. It's not that the garden numbs your mind, it just makes thinking less urgent. Somewhere, a dove calls out. Another answers. The space here wasn't meant for spectacle. It was designed for pause, for sighs, for the clink of teacups and the quiet hush of linen being folded. These were gardens where nothing had to happen, and often nothing did. You sit on a wide stone ledge and run your fingers across the surface. It's smooth in the middle from centuries of contact, hands, bowls, books, robes. The corners still hold dust, though. Dust and maybe a few whispered stories. You brush a little of it away. The stone doesn't seem to mind. You wonder how many people wandered through this corner over the centuries, seeking a moment of stillness. A mother escaping the chaos of court. A poet looking for a rhyme in the shape of a tree. A child learning to float in the shallow pool while an ant dozed nearby. Not every story makes it into the books. You can feel them here, lingered in the stone, soaked into the shade. You walk a bit more and notice something peculiar. The flora here is subtly different, more fragrant, less formal. Gardeners planted not just for appearance, but for memory. These were scent memories, touch memories, plants chosen because they reminded someone of somewhere else. A childhood in Kashmir, a long-lost orchard in Persia, a honeymoon in the hills of Bengal. Historians still argue whether these spaces were laid out by imperial decree or personal desire. Whether the secluded garden was planned from the beginning or evolved organically over time, probably a bit of both. Like most things worth keeping. You come across a simple water basin with an inscription on the edge. The carving is worn but still legible. Leave your name in the scent, not the stone. That feels like a direct message. From someone who knew what it was to be remembered too much. You follow the stream as it curls behind the pavilion, past a row of flowering bushes. Some of the petals are startlingly pink, most aggressively so. One falls as you pass and lands in your hair. You leave it there. The path narrows again, dipping under an arched passage with a wooden lattice overhead. Slits of sunlight pierce through in perfect lines, like nature's barcode. You walk slowly through the beams, and for a moment, the air feels golden. And then, like a dream inside, a dream, you arrive at a sunken garden. It's simple. It's just a square depression a few feet below ground level. Steps lead down into it. The walls are lined with blue tiles. There's a small fountain at one end and two stone benches at the other. You descend into it. It feels cooler, quieter, like the world has turned down its volume. Sunken gardens were rare but cherished. They were places for deep thinking, or not thinking at all. Some say they were designed to create the illusion of being held by the earth. Like the garden was hugging you back. You sit on one of the benches. You don't move for a while. A bee buzzes past, so close you feel its tiny wind. A gecko clings to the warm tile wall, blinking. Somewhere above, someone is humming. Softly, a lullaby maybe, or just a tune without words. These private corners weren't just a dance. They were essential, as even in the age of towering minarets and ivory thrones, rest had to be designed, protected, hidden. Sometimes the most powerful part of a palace was the place where nothing happened, where someone could sit and just be. The sun shifts slightly, and a new breeze stirs. The perfume here is sharper, less floral, more earthy. Maybe vetiver, maybe soil after watering. It smells like the inside of a clay pot left out in the rain. You take off your shoes and place your feet on the cool tile. It sends a tiny jolt up your spine, the kind that makes you sigh, not shiver. There's something about being slightly below ground, surrounded by plants and water and quiet walls, that makes your thoughts drift lower too. You think less in plans, more in sensations. Less about what time it is, more about whether that dragonfly will land or keep hovering. You watch it for longer than you meant to. Eventually, you rise and climb the steps back into the open. The private garden doesn't follow you. It stays where it is, waiting, ready for the next visitor who needs to disappear for a while. You walk slowly now, your limbs a little looser. The garden has done its job. You don't know how long you've been here, but it doesn't matter. Time in the Mughal garden isn't lost, it's replanted. You follow the scent of something new mint, and the distant sound of water. The walls fall away again, and the path opens, back into sunlight, back into symmetry. But you carry a little of that hidden garden with you now. A softness tucked just behind your ribs, a bit of peace folded neatly beside your breath. And just ahead, another curve, another scent, another story. The next curve in the path feels different, not just in shape, but in tone. The light is sharper, now filtered less through trees, more through archways and screens. The space opens again, but this time with purpose. A new kind of energy settles into the soles of your feet. Less hush, more hush pretending to be formal. You've entered the garden of diplomacy. This was where business happened, the Mughal version of a meeting room. But, with mangoes and peacocks. The setting is still tranquil, still blooming, but it's also strategic. Every palm tree, every pond, every breeze. Part of a performance, a negotiation softened by beauty. Ahead, you see a large rectangular court open to the sky and flanked by high, trimmed hedges. For water channels cut across it, dividing the space like a page folded into quarters. At the center, a raised marble platform with low cushions and a stone throne barely taller than your knees. It's not meant to intimidate, it's meant to ease. To draw someone in and gently press them into agreement. This is where the emperor met emissaries, traders, local chieftains, behind fortress walls or beneath domes, but here, surrounded by the persuasive calm of roses and gurgling water. The mules understood something modern negotiators often forget. People make better decisions when they're comfortable. So yes, the garden was a weapon, a very polite one, wrapped in honeysuckle and delivered with tea. You walk up the slight slope to the central platform. There's no one here now, just a few fallen petals on the stone. But your mind fills in the scene. An envoy from Persia, fidgeting with his robe. A Rajput prince, trying not to sweat through his silk tunic. A Mughal noble serving pomegranate juice like it's liquid gold. Every gesture rehearsed, every scent calculated to soften the spine. Historians still argue whether these meetings were truly diplomatic or just ritualized displays of dominance. Some say the garden lulled guests into submission. Others insist it was a genuine space of peace-building, a break from marble and menace. Either way, it worked. You sit on the low platform edge, your feet dangling. Below, one of the water channels reflects the sky in 4 perfect rectangles. You wonder how many deals were made here. How many promises floated away with the falling petals. How many alliances grew like vines, carefully trained but still wild at the edges. You stand and walk down the eastern path. It's lined with orange trees again, not by accident. The scent is faint, but present. Oranges were exotic, expensive, symbolic. Offering one was like offering peace, prosperity, and vitamin C, all at once. As you move along, you spot a curious little structure tucked against a hedge, a small stone alcove. Open on one side, with 2 built-in benches facing each other. A negotiation nook. It's easy to picture 2 old nobles here, arguing about trade routes while pretending to be interested in the hydrangeas. And those water channels? They weren't just decorative. They were psychological. Ever tried to argue angrily next to a bubbling stream? Exactly. The sound alone could defuse a sword fight. The garden's acoustics were part of its charm, a constant background whisper saying, maybe just talk it out. You lean over one of the channels now, watching the water glide past. Smooth, silent, purposeful. It catches the light just enough to shimmer, but not enough to distract. A design so understated you almost forget it took hundreds of workers to perfect it. Further ahead, there's another platform. This one shaded by a canopy of cloth faded now, but once embroidered in gold thread. You imagine it in its prime, rippling gently in the breeze as dignitaries lounged beneath it. Low tables held platters of candied fruits, almonds, and those suspiciously perfect grapes no one really trusts, but everyone eats anyway. Someone might be composing a ghazal in the corner, another sharpening a quill, another just pretending to listen while plotting a marriage alliance in their head. You spot a small inscription carved into a stone bench, in Persian again, with that same graceful curve that makes every letter feel like it's already halfway to becoming a vine. Speak gently, for the roses are listening. That feels like diplomacy, Mughal style. You take a seat beside it. The stone is still warm from the sun. You rest your palm on its surface, and it hums faintly, as if storing 1,000 overheard conversations. None of them yours, but you feel welcomed anyway. Suddenly, a breeze stirs the canopy. Leaves rustle. Somewhere above, a coal calls. A servant from the past, possibly silent, peers in your imagination, pouring sherbet into a glass, placing it at your side, and vanishing before you can thank him. And this right here was the point. The garden turned business into ritual, politics into poetry. You were never just meeting someone here. You were being hosted by paradise, tricked gently into peace. You rise again. The path continues, but you linger a moment. Looking, listening. A dragonfly hovers above one of the water channels. It catches the light in iridescent flashes, then vanishes just as quickly. Like an idea. Like a deal struck in a whisper and sealed with sweet lime and silence. There's a staircase at the edge of the court, barely noticeable. You follow it down, where the garden steps into a lower terrace. The walls tighten again. The trees lean in. And suddenly, you're in a smaller chamber. A shaded garden room, surrounded on 3 sides by arched colonnades, and on the 4th by open sky. You step to the center. A fountain here too, but different. The water doesn't flow, it leaps. In tiny bursts, a pressure-fed design created centuries ago by engineers who really understood drama. This was a garden announcement. The emperor is here. Or perhaps you are here. And everyone else is lucky enough to be in your presence. Because yes, while the Mughal garden could soothe and soften, it could also dazzle. On cue, some of these fountains used hidden pipes and gravity-fed systems that spouted water to preset rhythms. Others made soundy as actual musical fountains, centuries before Vegas even thought about it. People swore they heard tunes in the splashes. Others thought it was just wishful thinking, mixed with wine and moonlight. Historians still debate whether those fountains were functional music or just very clever engineering theater. Either way, they made an impression. You sit on the edge of the central basin and watch the tiny fountains spit. Pause, spit again. It's hypnotic, almost meditative. You find yourself timing your breath to the rhythm without realizing it. A little further off, you see 2 peacocks slowly circling each other near a carved pillar. They look like they're trying to remember whether they're courting or arguing. Typical. The sunlight angles now, starting to soften toward the late afternoon. You can feel the garden changing, again cooling, preparing for another roll. Soon it will become the garden of evening, of lanterns, of slow music and lingering footsteps. But not yet. For now, it's still diplomacy hour. And as you rise once more, you think, maybe all politics should happen this way, in the company of hummingbirds, on carpets of moss, with the option of falling asleep between every clause. You follow the next path as it winds away from the court of whispers, back toward water, shadow, scent. And ahead, just visible, something new rises beyond a cluster of cypress. A tomb, or maybe a memory made of marble. You keep walking. The cypresses part slowly, like quiet ushers at the threshold of something sacred. Their shadows stretch long and narrow, drawing you toward a structure that rises like a poem recited in stone. It glows in the late light pale, polished, deliberate, and then you see it fully. A tomb, but not a grim one. Not at all. It's nestled in the garden like a sleeping thought, perfectly placed, perfectly still. Not looming with sorrow, but resting with grace. The marble gleams, kissed by time and sunlight. The dome curves upward, like a sigh turned skyward. Around it, everything is calm. Everything listens. You've entered the garden of memory. This is where the Mughal concept of death breathes in petals and geometry, where loss becomes landscape. It's not about mourning. It's about placement, about order, about the soul returning to paradise, but with a very good view. The first thing you notice is how quiet it is, not just silent, but reverent. The birds don't sing here, they murmur. The fountains flow more gently. Even the breeze lowers its voice, like someone entering a room mid-prayer. You move closer. This isn't just any tomb. This is the kind of tomb that tells you the person inside mattered, and still does. You walk along the edge of the marble platform. It's cool beneath your fingers. The symmetry here is flawless. Pathways radiate out in 4 directions, intersected by water channels. It's the Sharbug again, the 4-part garden of paradise. But now, it's not about living emperors. It's about honoring the ones who stayed behind. The mules didn't just bury their dead, they choreographed their afterlives. Tombs like this weren't separate from gardens, they were gardens. The soul didn't rest in a crypt underground. It lounged in a celestial orchard, surrounded by scent and shade, lulled to sleep by fountains and birdsong. You step through the main arch and into the tomb chamber itself. It's empty now, save for the Sanatafa false grave above the real one, which lies below, hidden and quiet. The room is dim, but light filters in through lattice windows, scattering delicate patterns across the stone floor like a lace shawl thrown over sunlight. You stand still, and then, from somewhere in the walls, you hear it. A whisper, not a voice, not a ghost. Just the echo of your own breath bouncing back to you in soft fragments. The Mughal architects built these tombs with acoustics in mind. A single word spoken here would spiral gently through the chamber, like a prayer trying not to be overheard. You don't say anything, you just listen. Outside, the garden continues its slow, fragrant rhythm. Cypress trees stand sentinels chosen for their shape, their symbolism. They represent eternity, always upright, always reaching. You walk beneath them and wonder how many others have wandered here, thinking of loved ones or of their own endings. Somewhere, tucked in a corner, is a small grave, less adorned, humble, a companion, a favorite servant, a poet buried near the emperor who commissioned their verses. In Mughal tradition, even death was layered hierarchy nestled into symmetry. Historians still argue whether the positioning of these tombs followed strict cosmology or simply aesthetic instinct. Was the main axis aligned with Mecca, with the stars, with the best breeze? Or was it just what looked right when viewed from the emperor's favorite bench? You turn and see it, that bench, facing the tomb, placed not for the crowd, but for one person. You sit on it. From here, the tomb looks perfectly framed between 2 flowering trees. Their blossoms fall occasionally, landing on the path like punctuation. You wonder who once sat here, staring at that marble dome. A grieving consort, a quiet noble. The very architect, admiring his work with a bittersweet smile. You sit a little longer. The Mughal idea of paradise wasn't about golden thrones or floating harpists. It was this: gardens, water, fruit, cool air. The presence of beauty arranged just so. You rise and walk along the outer wall of the tomb enclosure. A narrow path takes you to a shaded corner, where a fig tree leans into the stone, as if listening. The roots twist along the wall like veins, like threads of time pulling everything gently downward. Nearby, a gardener tends a patch of flowering basil. You nod. He nods back. Nothing needs to be said. You notice something in the design, now something subtle. The tomb is centered perfectly within the garden, yes. But from this angle, the symmetry softens. The view becomes more natural, more casual. like the garden is winking. Because this, too, was intentional. The Mughal garden wasn't just meant to be looked at from one position. It invited movement, different views, changing perspectives. Like memory, it's self-fluid, shifting, sometimes clearer from a distance. You round the final corner and find a shallow pool just behind the tomb. It reflects the dome almost perfectly, save for a few ripples. You crouch beside it and watch as the image trembles slightly. There and not there. Solid and dissolving. It feels like the garden is reminding you. Everything fades. But if placed just right, if honored, gently some things echo. You trace a line in the water with your fingertip. The dome blurs, reforms. A bird lands on the far edge and takes a sip, unbothered by your intrusion. And then you hear a sound. Soft footsteps. Not behind you, but ahead. You turn, and there, on the next path, someone walks slowly through the trees. Not looking at you, not waiting, just continuing. It could be a ghost, or maybe just another visitor. You follow. The tomb disappears behind a veil of branches, and the path slopes downward again. Another garden begins, more open, sunlit, playful. The atmosphere shifts once more. But you carry something now. Not grief, not even reverence, just quiet. And maybe a little envy. Because whoever is buried back there, they chose well. To rest forever in a place where the flowers never stop blooming. The water never stops whispering, and the world, for once, takes a breath and slows down. You step forward, the path dusting your heels, the scent of roses close, and the cypress watching. The garden waits. The tomb has vanished behind the greenery now, absorbed into memory as the garden gently shifts tone once more. The path flattens and widens. The breeze feels different here, lighter, almost busier, as if it's carrying voices you can't quite make out. A faint metallic clinking rides on the air, like coins in a pouch or wind chimes tuned to commerce. This part of the garden hums not with insects or fountains, but with trade. You've wandered into the garden's invisible bloodstream. Here's the secret. Mughal gardens weren't just aesthetic wonders or spiritual metaphors. They were deeply plugged into economic networks. They lived, thrived, and bloomed because of trade. Of gold, of spices, of silk, of water rights. Of good old-fashioned empire-wide logistics. You stop beneath a shady arch and notice a cluster of date palms. You didn't see those earlier. They're not native to this part of the subcontinent. No, they're from further West Arabian Peninsula, Iran, even North Africa. So how did they get here? They traveled. Just like the ideas, the artisans, the marble, the manuscripts, the menus, nothing in the Mughal garden is truly local land. That was the point. You walk further along the path, where a long reflecting pool draws your eye to the far end, where a small structure sits like a punctuation mark at the sentence's end. It's a simple arcade, but the columns are from Gujarat. The tiles from Herat. The design inspired by the Timurid gardens of Samarkand. But the red sandstone base quintessentially Indian. A living collage held together by water and diplomacy. And at the heart of it all, gold. The Mughal Empire thrived on its control of gold mined, traded, gifted, and the garden reflected that. Literally. Some of the water channels, if you squint just right, shimmer as if dusted with treasure, not metaphorically. The mules sometimes actually scattered gold coins into fountains for ceremonies. You pause beside a square pond and imagine Eton imperial celebration. Guests tossing diners into the water like wishes made of currency. The sound alone would have been magical. Tinkling metal over marble. That's ASMR for royalty. But it wasn't just opulence, it was messaging. These gardens were a soft power showcase. You're not just surrounded by beauty, you're surrounded by proof of prosperity. Every imported tree, every rare flower, every hand-woven canopy overhead. A whisper, we can afford this. And we can make it thrive. A nearby plaque probably added later mentions that this part of the garden once hosted traveling merchants. Not booths or stalls, but meetings under awnings. Tea offered in porcelain cups from China. Contracts inked in Persian, Tamil, and Portuguese. The Mughal garden wasn't sealed off from the world. It invited it in, very politely, and made it sit down on embroidered cushions. You spot a small pile of crumbling bricks off to the side, nearly hidden beneath a bush of jasmine. Unremarkable at first. But as you look closer, you notice faint carvings on the stone. Gorgeous symbols denoting regions, clans, goods. It's like a garden-based guestbook, signed in the language of commerce. Historians still argue whether these economic gatherings and gardens were common or only ceremonial. Did real deals happen here, or was it all just diplomatic theater? The answer, of course, is yes. You continue down the path. It narrows briefly, then opens into a surprisingly sunny terrace where grapes once grew. The vines are gone now, but the trellises remain. You run your hand along one, smooth from centuries of wind, rain, and the occasional bird having a crisis of identity. In the Mughal heyday, grapes from Kandahar were prized delicacies. Entire routes were maintained just to ensure their safe passage to the gardens of Lahore and Agra. A bunch of grapes, perfectly chilled and presented at the height of summer. That was prestige. That was network flexing. You pass a large basin filled with floating lotus flowers. They nod gently on the surface, like diplomats in agreement. The water smells clean and slightly metallic, a reminder that aqueducts brought fresh water to these gardens from miles away. Water rights were power. Whoever controlled the flow controlled the bloom. And speaking of water, here comes one of the most fascinating parts. You reach a squat tower, partially ruined, with spiral stairs climbing into shadow. You ascend slowly, each step echoing slightly. At the top, you find a strange little platform. Flat, open, with stone grooves cut into the floor. It's an ancient water lift system. Gardens, for all their grace, require plumbing. The mules used ingenious hydraulic systems, Persian wheels, aqueducts, gravity channels to maintain their green sanctuaries, even through dry spells. They turned engineering into elegance. A hidden army of water kept everything alive. You stare down from the platform and realize the layout below wasn't just pretty, it was practical. A central channel runs downhill, branching subtly toward each bed, each pool. The gradient is just right. The slope just enough. Every drop placed with intention. You descend again, slower this time, as if each stair is teaching you something. And there's something odd as you return to the garden floor. A strange-looking tree. Tall, narrow, with papery bark and silver-green leaves. It doesn't belong. Definitely not native. You check a small tag hammered into the soil: Eucalyptus globulus. Introduced much later, maybe by the British. But it stands here now, part of the new network. Not entirely unwelcome, just different. A reminder that trade brings not just riches, but change. You sit beneath it, and the wind moves through the leaves like whispered calculations. You wonder what it would have felt like to be a merchant standing in this very spot, balancing admiration with opportunism. Wondering if that Persian vase could fit in your pack. Wondering what the garden itself was worth, not in beauty, but in bargaining power. It's funny, really. You came here looking for petals and poetry. And instead, you find invoices disguised as vines. You find that beneath the softness of the roses, there's a root system of trade deals and shipping routes and artisans paid in bolts of fabric. And it works. Because the garden hides nothing, it just makes it smell nicer. You rise again. Further down the path, you see a gate flanked by citrus trees. The air here is heavier, not stifling, just thick with sweetness. This was the exit route. The corridor where guests would be escorted back toward carriages or camels or wherever it is that real changers go when the meeting's over. But not you, not yet. You take one last look at this part of the garden, the vines. The stone, the echoes of silk rustling during contract negotiations, you feel a strange gratitude. That trade doesn't have to be sterile, that even economics can bloom. The light shifts, the citrus trees shiver slightly in the breeze. And you keep walking toward what comes next. Maybe not another deal, maybe just a cup of tea. The citrus trees thin behind you, their perfume trailing like the end of a sentence. The path bends lazily, confidently as if it knows you're not in any rush. And why would you be? Time moves differently here. It drips rather than ticks. Ahead, the garden becomes strange again, not chaotic, just layered, as if it's remembering itself in fragments. This is where memory becomes mosaic. The Mughal garden, always evolving, always reflecting, eventually fell under new hands. And those hands? They did what all hands do. They rearranged, repainted, reclaimed. You're walking now through a garden shaped by colonists, caretakers, poets, and passersby. A palimpsest of paths. The British, for one, couldn't resist a good symmetrical shrub. But they also couldn't help tweaking irritating lawns, trimming back the wild, pruning everything into obedient little hedges. You pass one now, a neat square of perfectly clipped boxwood. It looks like it wants to apologize for being so geometrically smug. You glance around. The canopy overhead is thinner, the trees more evenly spaced. This isn't the Mughal wild of fragrance and shadow. This is order, empire order. Cricket pitch order, yet beneath it you still feel the original pulse. It never left. A bed of native lilies pushes stubbornly through the imported grass. A palm leans at an angle no British gardener would have permitted. A tiny brick path veers away from the main walkway, leading nowhere in particular. Perhaps somewhere important. The colonial era reinterpreted the Mughal garden but never fully erased it. That's the thing about a place rooted in water and symmetry. It always grows back. You find a low fountain, oddly dry. It sits at the center of a square lawn, probably added in the 19th century. The stonework is still Mughal delicate, floral, curved like a sigh. But the surrounding benches are Victorian iron, heavy, decorative, in that I'm too fancy to be comfortable way. You sit anyway, just to try. The bench creaks, the fountain gurgles once, then goes back to sleep. This was once a garden of rest, then a garden of rule, now something in between. The British made parks out of paradise, turned promenades into pathways, hosted tea parties where once emperors whispered policy beneath mango trees. And yet, somehow, the soul of the Mughal garden persisted. A child runs past barefoot, chasing a squirrel. Neither notices the carefully arranged gravel. Neither cares. That, in itself, feels like a small rebellion. Historians still argue whether the colonial repurposing of Mughal gardens was a sign of respect, appropriation, or practical reuse. Some say it preserved history. Others say it trapped it in amber. The truth, as always, is probably buried somewhere between the flower beds. You wander down a side path bordered by hibiscus, bright red, showy, very un-British, a leftover from the original design. Or maybe a rewelding. A breeze kicks up and you smell rain. Not actual rain, just the ghost of it. Maybe it rained here yesterday, maybe 200 years ago. The scent is tucked into the soil like an old letter, folded tight. You pass a sign nailed to a tree. Please do not pluck the flowers. You smile. Not because you planned to, but because the mules would have found the idea hilarious. Their gardens were meant to be smelled, touched, harvested. The rose was not sacred. It was useful, edible, brewable, poetic, yes, but also an ingredient. The modern rules don't quite fit the ancient rhythm. You turn a corner and stumble upon something surprising. Graffiti. Not new, old, scratched into a stone wall in a loopy, uncertain script. English letters, maybe a name, maybe a date. 1864. The moss has done its work, trying to erase it with dignity. But it lingers. Someone sat here once, long before you, long after the mules, long enough ago to be history now, too. You wonder what they saw. Maybe the same things. Maybe a different garden entirely. You keep walking. The ground underfoot becomes uneven, not by design, just where. The path is cracked, roots pushing through. A nearby wall is split by ivy. Time is reclaiming slowly. The neat colonial grid surrendering to the original pulse. And suddenly, just ahead, you find something unexpected. A tiny shrine. Nothing official, nothing mapped. Just a cluster of stones around a tree. A red thread wrapped 3 times around the trunk. A clay lamp long since gone cold. The Mughal garden may have begun as imperial paradise, but now it's a communal space. Locals stroll here, lovers meet here, vendors whisper here, and sometimes someone brings an offering, lights a flame, and speaks to the leaves. The empire is gone. The garden remains. Not exactly as it was, but not lost either. It has absorbed each era like water. Colonial formality, local faith, modern nostalgia all coexisting under the same banyan canopy. You sit again on the edge of a low wall, where the sun hits just right. Around you, a pigeon pecks at the ground. A woman sweeps leaves into a neat pile. Somewhere nearby, a radio plays a song from the 1970s, Hindi lyrics. Western chord progressions, all of it layered, like the garden itself. A historian once wrote, "The Mughal garden has outlived its architects." True, but it has also outlived its conquerors, its caretakers, its critics, and its curious tourists. It's not a museum. It's a slow-moving story. You rise again and follow the path toward what looks like a more modern section, maybe a government-installed herb garden. Concrete planters. Labels on sticks: oregano, lemongrass, tulsi, curry leaf. The signage is clear, the layout less so. It's a little chaotic and a little perfect. The Mughal ideal of the Shahbag Zafar Park garden was about control. But this section, this is the opposite. A modern reclaiming, less symmetry, more spontaneity. Kids running between planters. Someone's lunch being eaten under a neem tree. A stray cat curled beside the thyme. You laugh softly. The garden hasn't fallen apart. It's just let go a little. And maybe that's what all great gardens do eventually. They start as visions, become monuments, then slowly dissolve into places, used, loved, rested in, reclaimed. You walk through one more arch. This one, new, stark, functional, concrete, pretending to be timeless. And you realize this isn't the end of the garden. It's the edge, the beginning of the city, of traffic, of now. But you carry the garden with you, in the scent still clinging to your clothes, in the slow cadence of your breath, in the realization that paradise once planted never fully leaves. It just changes shape, like memory, like history, like you. The edge of the city hums nearby, low, ever-present buzz that nudges your awareness, though it hasn't yet intruded fully. But here, where stone gives way to slope and the wind carries stories more than sound, the Mughal garden reveals another of its layered identities. You've arrived at the Garden of Legacy. It doesn't look different, not at first. The trees still whisper, the fountains still murmur, the shadows still perform their soft rituals. But beneath it all, something stirs, something older than memory, and yet constantly being rewritten. Legacy isn't fixed. It grows, decays, and regrows like vines over a forgotten pavilion. The Mughal garden's influence didn't vanish when the emperors did. It simply changed clothes. New empires rose. New borders drew themselves across old soil. Yet the garden blueprint, the sharbag, the scented air, the cool geometry spread like pollen on the wind, and not just across the subcontinent. You walk beneath an arbor of climbing roses, their petals dropping like confetti after a celebration long since ended. The air is soft with their perfume, but also something else, a suggestion of memory rehearsed. Like a story retold so many times, it becomes embroidered with the teller's breath. This is where the Mughal garden lives on, inspired, mimicked, reimagined. You pass a pair of young trees, newly planted, with small placards bearing dates and names. Part of a restoration project? Maybe. The garden as public heritage. The state now curates what emperors once controlled. It's neat, in theory. But under the officialness, the ghosts of earlier forms linger. Take the modern parks in cities like Delhi or Lahore, neatly manicured, yes, but still built on the bones of ancient layouts. Their names may not shout Mughal, but their shadows do. You sit beneath a neem tree that seems entirely indifferent to your presence. It's old, maybe older than you can guess. It doesn't care about dynasty or language, but you do, so you listen. And slowly, you begin to notice something wonderful. The Mughal garden seeded more than plants. It seeded ways of seeing, ways of building, ways of resting. You glance up and see a chhatri dome half hidden in foliage ornate, graceful, now playing host to pigeons. In Rajasthan, you recall, later Rajput palaces adopted these forms, sometimes out of homage, sometimes out of defiance, sometimes both. Legacy has a sense of humor that way. You walk toward the dome. The ground here is uneven. Time is trying to reclaim it, one cracked tile at a time. Inside the chhatri, the stone benches are worn smooth. You sit on one, running your palm along the surface. It's cool, but in that way, old things often are holding the temperature of long-forgotten mornings. The Mughal garden influenced not just architecture, but behavior, inherited rituals, afternoon naps. Even now, across northern India and Pakistan, generations later, people still seek shade after lunch, still listen for fountains, still fold themselves onto cool stone floors for an hour of sleep that feels almost spiritual. Not laziness, reverence, the day pausing to breathe. Historians still argue whether the emphasis on afternoon rest in Mughal culture was ritual, health practice, or just good taste. But whatever the reason, it's endured. You lie back on the bench, just for a moment, and it's there, the lull. Not tiredness, exactly, just a slowing, a lengthening of each blink. The air settles on your skin like gauze. The garden doesn't demand anything here, simply offers. You sit up again barely and notice a detail above you. On the inside curve of the dome, a painted medallion. Faded, but still elegant. Blue and gold, Persian motifs. A reminder of the garden's artistic legacy. Mughal aesthetics didn't just influence gardens. They left fingerprints on poetry, music, miniature painting, carpet weaving on the ways shadows fall in a well-designed room. You pass a long stone slab etched with inscriptions, not Arabic or Persian, but Urdu, a poem by a 19th century mystic. It's about rain and longing, and the memory of a garden that once bloomed near the edge of a river that no longer flows. You don't need a full translation. The emotion hums right through it. Because here's the quiet truth. Even when Mughal gardens fell into ruin, their idea lingered. In literature, in lullabies, in the subconscious geometry of how people still plant courtyards. It's not about monuments anymore. It's about feeling. You pass a group of schoolchildren clustered around a guide. The kids fidget, mostly, but one of them is squinting intently at a carved panel on a wall, tracing it in the air, making sense of something ancient with new fingers. That's legacy. You turn down a side path, less manicured, a little wild, and you spot something utterly unexpected. A garden being made, not restored, not reconstructed, made. 3 workers kneel in the dirt, laying bricks. Raised beds are forming in rough squares. Clay channels snake between them. Young citrus trees and burlap sacks wait like guests about to be introduced. You linger at the edge, unnoticed, and watch. One of the workers straightens, wipes his forehead, then steps back to admire the curve of a water trench. It's imperfect, slightly crooked, but it will hold water, and that, in itself, is enough. The Mughal garden lives on, not through replication, but through echo, through how we learn to arrange the world. Through every moment, someone chooses a tree, not just for shade, but for scent. A stone bench, not just for posture, but for pause. You walk away slowly, letting the scene behind you blur. Back on the main path, you come to a wide, quiet expanse, just grass now. But once, it may have been a garden theater, a music pavilion, a moonlit poetry gathering. Hard to say, and yet easy to imagine. You sit down, this time directly on the grass. You look up, no birds, just sky. The Mughal garden, in all its perfect divisions, always left space for the infinite. Even when gridded, it gave you a window to the heavens, a small human plot within the vast divine design. And maybe that's the final legacy. Not the bricks, not the fountains, not even the shade, but the reminder that beauty isn't something to hoard. It's something to shape, to share, to rest inside for a while, and then quietly to pass on. The grass brushes your fingertips like a quiet thought, warm from the sun, uncaring of centuries. You rise slowly, your legs heavy from the stillness, but your mind is lit with that soft glow clarity that comes after resting in a place that remembers more than it tells. Now the path leads into the heart of mystery. You've crossed beauty, legacy, and memory. But here, the garden becomes unknowable again. Not because it's forgotten, but because some parts were never fully understood to begin with. The Mughal garden was full of deliberate design, but it also left room for wonder. For things placed just so, without ever explaining why. And that brings us to the anomalies. You step beneath a colonnade with a low ceiling and a mosaic floor, intricate as a dream you almost remember. The tiles are different, here strange blues and ochres, a motif that seems to shimmer and shift as you walk past. Is it a bird, a flame, a prayer disguised as decoration? Nobody really knows. You've entered the section of forgotten meanings. There are thrones with no known occupant, paths that lead to nowhere, keep going. Water channels that begin under solid marble, as if feeding from some subterranean ghost. You come upon a circular platform, its edge marked by 8 evenly spaced pillars, some still standing, some broken. In the center, nothing. No statue, no basin. Just emptiness, precisely framed. It's tempting to fill it in with your own meaning. A sundial, a celestial observatory, an ancient game board for philosophers. Historians still argue whether these circular spaces were spiritual, scientific, or simply aesthetic flourishes. Some believe they were meant for meditation. Others think they marked astronomical alignment points where moonlight would strike during equinoxes. Still others will say it was a place for performance. Dancers under stars, voices rising in slow arcs of song. You stand at the center. The wind shifts. The air seems thinner here. And then there's the tower. Yes, another one. Tucked away at the far corner of the garden, where vines crawl without apology, stands a narrow structure plane, undecorated, too small to be defensive, too tall to be storage. Just a tower. You approach. Its wooden door is slightly open, swinging gently in the wind like it's tired of guarding its own secrets. Inside, a spiral staircase leads upward, narrow, uneven, but inviting in that you probably shouldn't. But you definitely will sort of way. You climb. The stone grows cooler with every step. Dust sifts down like flour through a sieve. The top chamber is barely a room, just enough space for a small window and a stone shelf carved directly into the wall. On that shelf, nothing. But the view through the window is precise. It frames one of the water channels perfectly. From here, you can see the entire length of it, shimmering and straight, ending in a fountain so far away it looks like a pinprick, a viewing tower, a hidden perch for lovers, a lookout for a gardener obsessed with perfection. You descend again, mind brimming with unanswered questions. But it's a gentle sort of mystery, the kind that doesn't demand answers, only appreciation. Further along the garden, another curiosity waits. You come upon what looks like a tiny amphitheater, a sunken oval lined with marble benches with a slightly raised dais in the center. The acoustics here are sharp. Even your softest step echoes like a question. No one knows exactly what this was for. A stage, a ceremonial pool, a lecture pit. You sit on one of the benches. Your breath bounces off the far wall and returns to you in half a second. That's deliberate. Somebody designed that. Somebody sat here, listening to something or someone. There's a phrase scratched faintly into the stone beside you. It's in Sanskrit, barely legible. To speak softly is to awaken the earth. Was it meant to be heard by many? Or just one? You leave the amphitheater and follow a low path veiled in vines. The temperature cools, the canopy thickens. Light becomes shy, and then suddenly you step into a clearing, and there it is. A stone tower, but not vertical. This one is squat, solid, shaped like an acorn. Tapered, smooth, utterly unlike any other structure in the garden, and most mysteriously, sealed. No door, no opening. Just a perfect windowless dome, maybe 3 meters high, resting on a marble base. It's often called the stone thimble, though no one knows what it really is. A time capsule, a secret shrine, it's a symbolic anchor for the entire garden layout. Theories bloom like jasmine. Some say it was the heart of a Novannish ritual. Others think it's a cenotaph for someone deliberately forgotten. Still others whisper that it was once filled with eyes, harvested from the Himalayas, and sealed within to cool the air around it. Unlikely, but delicious to imagine. You sit beside it, press your ear to the dome. Nothing. But you want to believe there's a hum, a murmur, something pulsing behind the stone like a sleeping heartbeat. You pull back and notice the carved lotus motif circling the base. One petal broken, the rest perfect. And as you rise to continue your walk, you notice how everything around this sealed tower seems to orbit it. Trees lean toward it, paths angle gently around it. Even the birds seem to circle just a little wider here. You leave the mystery behind, not solved, but savored. And isn't that what gardens are for? Not to answer, but to invite wondering, to soften the lines between knowing and imagining. As you return to the main path, you pass a low garden wall, etched with fading scripts in 3 languages. One of them is Persian, one Sanskrit. The third, you can't quite place it. Maybe it's a lost dialect. Maybe it's invented. Maybe it's just a prank from a poetic mason centuries ago. It says, "All paths are curved in paradise." You stop, smile, and keep walking. Your steps soften now, falling into rhythm with the garden's breath. The sun hangs lower, casting long amber streaks through the lattice of leaves above you. And just like that, you find yourself in the quiet after curiosity, after mystery, after marveling at what couldn't be explained. This is the part of the garden that feels like memory humming, not remembering exactly, but letting things settle, where the air starts to wrap itself around your shoulders like a light shawl, and you feel something shift. You've walked the spaces of emperors, of dreamers, of mathematicians and gardeners and ghosts. Now you've arrived where none of them claim anything. The garden opens into a wide, gentle field. Not quite meadow, not quite lawn, just space. Space that once might have been something grand, or maybe something modest. But now it's a canvas for the people who live around it. You see them, slowly, like figures in a painting coming into focus. A boy flying a paper kite. An old woman shelling peas into a cloth. A man reading under a fig tree, his eyes moving, but his body absolutely still. No one poses, no one explains. They just exist, here folded into the garden's present tense. And you understand, the Mughal garden was never just about emperors. It's about continuity. The way the space persists, despite rulers and ruins and renovations. The way people keep finding uses for beauty, even when its original purpose fades. You wander toward a row of low stone platforms, each one slightly uneven. They form a kind of open-air room. No walls, just implied boundaries. A few scattered rose petals on the ground suggest something recent, maybe a wedding, or a poetry reading, or just kids playing house. You sit on the lowest platform. It feels more lived in than the thrones you saw earlier. A gentle breeze carries the smell of sandalwood. Not from a tree someone nearby is burning incense. You follow the scent. It leads to a shrine not Mughal in design. More recent. Brightly painted, a blur of reds and oranges. It hugs the garden wall like a footnote, added lovingly by a later generation. You stand near it, quietly. Someone has left offerings. Not just flowers, but a small carton of milk, a rusted key, a photograph of a child in a school uniform. It's not royal, but it's sacred. And in its own way, it's part of the garden, because the garden didn't stay frozen in time. It folded into lives. You pass a spot where a line of clothes is strung between two cypresses. Towels, a baby's shirt, a faded sari, all fluttering like prayer flags from some gentle domestic religion. This, too, is part of it. The Mughal garden was always intended to evoke paradise, but no one said paradise had to be untouchable. Just arranged, just flowing, just lived in. You walk past a corner where new bricks meet old ones. A patch of cement interrupts centuries of sandstone. It's jarring, but also comforting. Someone cared enough to keep this corner from collapsing. Historians still argue whether these renovations preserve or dilute, whether heritage is better kept, pristine, or patched and adapted. But the birds nesting in the gutter don't care. They've made it theirs. That's one vote for adapted. A man sweeps the path ahead of you. He doesn't look up. His rhythm is slow and meditative. You nod as you pass. He nods back, still sweeping. His broom stirs a fine cloud of dust that rises, glows in a shaft of sunlight, and settles again. A moment, nothing more. You find yourself beside a garden bench, older than the others, worn smooth at the edges. You sit without thinking, and suddenly you hear music. Not loud, not recorded, not staged. Just someone, somewhere, playing a flute. The melody wavers, gentle and half improvised. It sounds like mourning and dreaming braided together. No one else seems to notice, or maybe they do, and they've simply decided not to chase it. That feels right. The mules, after all, believed in music that accompanied the setting sun. There were songs for dusk, for fragrance, for falling water. They didn't just see the garden, they listened to it. You lie back a little, eyes half closed. The sky above is pale gold, shifting into early dusk. The shadows of the trees stretch and tangle, threading over paths like silent dancers. And through the lattice of branches, you see a silhouette, not of a person, of a pavilion. Small, wooden, half forgotten. You rise and follow the glimpse. It takes you to the edge of the garden, a place where the formal design melts into overgrowth. The pavilion is crumbling, its roof sagging slightly, its stone floor cracked. But inside, the walls are covered in names, not royal ones, just names. Hundreds, maybe thousands. Scratched, inked, carved. Some careful, some wild. A century's worth of visitors leaving their evidence like time-lapse graffiti. You add nothing, but you run your finger across one. It reads simply, "I came here once." No date, no flourish. Just the quiet honesty of presence. And maybe that's what the Mughal garden has always been about. Not permanence, but presence. The emperors wanted to tame paradise. But paradise, it turns out, prefers to be shared. So now it's part of daily life. Children climb the balustrades. Dogs nap beneath the arches. Students scribble assignments beneath the same trees that once shaded court poets. And it's still a garden, still whole. You walk back toward the heart of the space. The fountain you passed earlier has started flowing again, just a trickle, but enough to catch the light. You pause beside it and catch your reflection. Tired, content, just a little blurred by the water's shimmer. You smile. Not everything has to be clear. Some things are better held lightly, like sand or music or dusk. The garden around you exhales, and so do you. You follow the sound of the fountain for a few more steps, letting it recede behind you like a familiar voice trailing off into other rooms. The light is waning now, gone, but turning syrupy, thick with evening gold. Somewhere, a bird calls and another answers, their notes bending softly like lullabies that remember older languages. The garden is almost quiet, not quite. You've entered the last stretch now, not of the garden, but of its story. And this chapter isn't written in marble or geometry. It's written in people, in memory, in the way stories hang in the air like mist long after the storyteller has gone to sleep. This is where the Mughal garden lives on as a cultural memory, not a structure. A presence. You stroll along a low wall covered in moss, tracing it with your hand, the stone cool in velvets, soft with age. Beyond it, the garden opens into a space that feels both sacred and improvised, an informal amphitheater. Or maybe just a place where people gather because the trees decided it was a good spot. There's a small chalkboard propped against a neem tree, smudged, half erased. Someone had written, "History class, 4 p.m." You're not late. The class is over, but its echo is still here. You step into the space and feel it. The mingling of generations. Not royals this time, but school children, teachers, picnickers, grandparents telling stories about a time when their grandparents strolled here, too. You sit on a low step and listen. Not to any voice in particular, but to the vibration of stories retold. Ones that didn't make it into textbooks, but survived in kitchens, in conversations under ceiling fans, in songs half sung while folding laundry. And so you realize, the Mughal garden never really left. It just became many things to many people. In Zimbabwe, they call this living heritage a tradition not frozen in time, but braided into everyday life. And though you're half a world away, the same principle breathes here. You walk toward a tree that wears cloth offerings on its limbs, strips of red and yellow tied in silent prayers. This tree wasn't planted by emperors, but it now holds more wishes than all the marble pavilions combined. You pause beneath it and wonder what stories children hear about this place now. Do they still imagine emperors strolling in silk robes, with trained hawks on their arms and rosewater in their cups? Or is the garden, for them, just a lovely place where their grandmother used to sit and hum songs from a radio that no longer works? Both, maybe. That's the thing about memory, it overlaps. Historians still argue whether cultural memory preserves truth or blurs it. Whether nostalgia distorts the original intent of spaces like these, but they forget something important. Truth isn't always the point. Connection is. You wander toward a newly planted bed of herbs. A small sign reads, "Medicinal Garden, Youth Project." The labels are in 3 languages: Hindi, Urdu, English, maybe more. Scratched in at the corners: Tulsi, Amaltas, Ashwagandha. The garden continues to teach, even when its lessons have changed. Not theology or geometry now, but care. Regrowth, grounded healing. Nearby, a mural dances across a crumbling plaster wall. It's colorful, modern, abstract at first glance. If you squint, you see the charbug shape hidden in the composition. A stylized fountain, a mango tree, a half-smiling moon. The Mughal garden reimagined in spray paint. You step back and take it in, feeling like you're inside the memory of a dream someone else had. And somehow, it still belongs to you. You pass a man balancing a tray of tea glasses. He offers you one with a nod. No ceremony, no performance, just a small kindness in the fading light. You accept. The glass warms your fingers. The tea is sweet, spiced with cardamom. You sip slowly, leaning against a sun-warmed wall. On the other side, kids are playing hide-and-seek. You hear them counting, giggling. One of them yells, "Found you," like it's the most triumphant declaration ever made beneath a flowering tree. Maybe it is. The Mughal garden now lives in that yell. In the laughter under its trees. In the Instagram posts and awkward engagement photos. In teenagers rehearsing dance moves near the old tombs. In college students sketching the pavilions on wrinkled paper. And yes, in education. Several schools nearby still include lessons about Mughal gardens. Not just as history, but as art, as environment, as civic space. Some even bring students here to measure symmetry, to write poems beside fountains, to guess what a garden says when you listen to it long enough. And some just come to nap under trees. There's a special kind of legacy in being part of someone's lazy afternoon. You finish your tea and set the glass gently on the wall. You notice that someone scratched a line into the surface. They're not graffiti, not vandalism, just quiet sentence. "My grandfather kissed my grandmother here." That's it. A whole novel's worth of emotion tucked into one line. A history book with only one sentence, and somehow it's enough. You stroll on, past a shaded pond where someone has floated banana leaves with tiny candles on them. Past a banyan tree whose aerial roots now reach the ground like old hands holding onto the earth. Past a bench that remembers every heartbreak and every confession whispered into cupped hands in the dark. And all of this, the laughter, the napping, the prayers, the chalkboard classes, the tea trays, the banana leaves, it isn't just nostalgia. It's inheritance, not gold, not land, not scrolls or relics, but silence, shade, arrangement, ritual. You sit on a stone step at the garden's western edge, where the sun casts its final long rays like blessings. The day exhales, and so do you. Someone lights incense behind you. Someone hums a lullaby ahead of you. A bat flits past, its wings sketching a sentence in the air you'll never quite read. You close your eyes, and the garden continues. The sky deepens now, no longer gold, but a bruised lavender brushed with charcoal. The air has cooled and thickened just enough to curl around your ankles like a cat settling in. Somewhere, a match is struck. A flicker, then the soft orange glow of an oil lamp. Evening has arrived, and the garden does not mind. You're in its final movement, the long, slow note at the end of a song. Everything you've seen, everything you've wondered, has led you here. Not to an ending, but to the part where things become quiet enough to echo, and the echo begins in your body. You sit on a carved bench beneath a fig tree, its roots sprawling across the stone like a sleeping giant's fingers. Above you, the leaves rustle with that nighttime hush, less a sound than a suggestion, as if the tree is reminding you to slow down, to listen. A family passes nearby, to children skipping, a grandmother trailing behind, her shawl catching the breeze. She stops for a moment, rests her hand on the trunk of a tree like it's an old friend, and then continues on without a word. You smile. It's strange how peaceful this place becomes as night rises. You'd expect darkness to make it feel eerie, but it doesn't. It makes it feel returned. Like the garden was never meant for daylight alone. The mules understood this. They planned for it. In certain pavilions, they placed marble screens with tiny perforations so that moonlight would scatter into starbursts across the floor. In others, they burned sandalwood candles to draw out the jasmine's night bloom. The garden didn't sleep. It shifted. You follow a winding path now lit by small lanterns placed at regular intervals. Some are electric, others, older, still burn oil. They flicker in rhythm, casting uneven shadows across the path. You walk more slowly now. It feels respectful. It feels necessary. You pass a quiet fountain. The water still flows, but it's almost invisible in the dark only. The sound remains, a delicate chime like wind over glass. You crouch beside it, dipping your fingers in. The water is cold, but not shocking. It's the kind of cool that wakes you gently. Nearby, someone's singing. You don't see them, not at first, but the voice is soft, low, untrained, and unafraid. A folk melody, older than memory. The words sound like a lullaby or a prayer, or maybe both. The song fades as you walk on, and then, without quite planning it, to return to where you started. The garden gate. It looks different now, softer, less ceremonial, a little crooked in the dim light, as if it's just another tree among many. And maybe it is. You lean against the wall beside it, tracing the faded pattern of vines carved into the stone. They swirl in and out of each other, looping without end. Like the garden, like its memory, like you. Because here's the quiet truth. You've changed. You didn't mean to. You didn't even notice it happening. But somewhere between the sunlit citrus grove and the sealed stone dome, between the laughter of school kids and the hush of falling petals, something loosened inside you. You began to see differently, to breathe with the rhythm of a place built not just to impress, but to comfort, to hold, to repeat its gentle message again and again. Slow down, look closer, rest here. That is the legacy of this place. Not the marble, not the inscriptions, not the emperors. The legacy is how it makes you feel. Even now, as the world darkens and your eyes close, let it all soften. The sounds, the colors, the patterns, they've done their part. You've walked slowly. You've lingered in shade and traced ancient tiles with your fingertips. You've listened to fountains speak in syllables too old to translate. So let all of that settle. Let your breath match the rhythm of the garden, the rise and fall, the flow and hush. No sharp turns now. No new ideas. Just the slow unspooling of the day into something weightless. The lights in the garden dim further, one by one. Not extinguished, just muted. Like eyes half closed. Like candles near their end, the trees no longer swathe, they simply are. Their roots curl deeper, their leaves still, their limbs stretched in the direction of dreams. And you're not walking anymore. You're not thinking about design or dynasty or meaning. You're just here, held by the same quiet geometry that has cradled emperors, poets, children, lovers, and the nameless thousands who wandered in and wandered out again. It doesn't matter who you are now. The garden welcomes you just the same. You lie back not on a bench, not on the ground, but somewhere in between. That gentle place where thought becomes feeling, and feeling becomes nothing at all. And as your eyes drift closed, the last sound you hear is water, flowing, not rushing, just moving in its time, like memory, like night, like you.